Hey everybody, welcome to a episode of In the Chute, where Kalen tries to throw something out there that I may or may not know the answer to and see
He
if I'll
always knows the
own up
answer.
to it. It
Um,
might be made up. Yeah, there you go. What do you got, Kalen?
all right, so I got two today, but for the first one, any tips that you could have for or possibly managing expectations for those of I don't know individuals, new farmers, new ranchers to essentially agriculture. Like, what's the best practices to or advice for managing cow and horse herds specifically? You know, we've had bigger horse herds and then smaller cow herds, and then bigger cow herds and the smaller horse herds. Looking specifically as any newcomers into agriculture or ranching specifically, when it comes to looking at those two types of herds and managing them to the most amount of, I don't know, profit, whatever you can do, what's like probably your number one advice for each specific herd? Because they are, like we've talked about this before, horses and cows are like dogs and cats, so trying to like manage the two, what would be your tip for each?
It's not like they don't get along. It's just that they are. It's a completely different
Right,
market, completely different uses.
squares and
Um,
circles, whatever you want.
yeah, exactly. Yeah. Um, the thing that's probably different between the two is the horse market swings. I think has wider swings than the cattle market. And sometimes the market's depressed. People aren't buying horses. They can't afford them. And this is, something that's um, been historical, but in the last probably 10 years, it seems like it didn't matter what kind of social um, hardships that people are under, meaning economies. Those that want to have horses are going to have horses, and they'll pay for them, and they'll pay to keep them. So with cattle, well, and the part of that is you can set your own price. You control, and we've talked about this before. Like a silversmith or a jeweler, they put so much work into a piece that they're working on, and they know what they have into it. They know what they have to have for a profit. This is the price they set. If you don't like it, don't buy it. If you want it bad enough, you're going to pay what they ask. Well, we don't set markets on cattle, but we do set markets, our price on our horses. And one of the things we try to do is make our horses marketable and not have them priced so high that people can't afford them. I mean, we generally have reasonably priced horses. I mean, they're not the cheapest things there, but we haven't been selling $20,000 horses, which you see that happening now. And
and
it's like,
and
it's
believe
just
it or not,
nuts.
sometimes those $20,000 horses, depending on what your frankly what your business is, they could be cheap or it could be reasonably priced too. I've seen cutting horses that are around 20 to 30 grand. And then you go to a different aspect of this agriculture, which is racing horses, and 20 to 30,000 is pennies.
Right.
We're
Well, and
looking
you,
at potential millions here.
yeah, same way with a high end cutting horse. I mean,
Right.
same deal, but the horse doesn't know what it's worth. The horse is just a
Yeah.
horse, right? It's part of that is the training behind it. Most of it's training behind it, what it'll do, and its abilities. So, how good of an athlete is it, and how good has it been taught? So, but you can't even always control those markets. I mean, you're not going to control the markets, but you can say, okay, this is what I have to have for this animal because I've got this much work into it. And you look around like, you know what? That's what others are getting. Now it's a matter of who's going to want to buy it
Right.
and why would they want to buy it? Is this horse a solid horse, or is it just has it got a fancy spin on it in an arena? And we've seen that happen where people will buy up horses and flip them like you flip a house.
Right.
And you can do that for a while, but that eventually catches up with people because they're turning out a product that's just putting a coat of paint on it and making it look good. So the cattle market is a little different. We've talked ad nauseum about that, where you don't control it. You're trying to do the best you can in a market that is um, outside of your control from start to finish. So um, looking at long term and trying to predict is sometimes foolish. I think most of the time, because you can't necessarily predict. And if you happen to make a decision and it just works out, you look like a genius. And if it doesn't quite work out, you look like an idiot because, like, how could you not see that coming?
Right.
Hindsight's 2020. I mean, that's perfect to be able to look back and what's been going on every year for the last 40 years and, make a decision based on what happened versus what is going to happen. And that's, everybody's an expert after the fact. So, your weather patterns, I mean, all of that stuff. I mean, weather's king. It doesn't matter what it is, and having enough grass to be able to support what you've got. Having the expertise and the abilities with the horses is a way giant step above the abilities with the cows, because you're not personally handling that cow. You're managing them, but you're not getting on their back, and you're not getting them to do something to perform. And that takes some skill. It takes some know-how. Um, Certainly a lot of time involved, and the risk is there, or you can minimize your risk with just the cows. Not that it's not risky, but you can sure make a bad decision on a horse, or uh, choose to get on them that day, and it's not the right decision. So, just being able to manage the risk around all of them as well.
The when it comes to like the horses specifically, there's a lot of people that do one or the other. There's us that we raise, train, and sell the horses. It's all us in house. There's others that they may breed and raise the horses, but they'll essentially outsource training, bring that horse back in, and then they'll sell it under their name. And there's nothing wrong with that. It's just that's how their business is set up. Uh, how do you which one do you think is more effective, more efficient, maybe cost effective? Like run me through
Uh,
that real quick.
Well, again, that's gonna really depend on the finished product,
Yeah.
and what you think it's worth at the end. Because I've trained for other breeders, and they just flat told me, said, when I need to sell horses, that's when I call you and have you train these horses, because your training sells the horse. It isn't the horse. I can't sell it because of my training. It's just not quite there. And I don't mean to be braggadocious. I mean, it's just, when you start from the beginning, and your goal is to keep this horse, solid, safe, confident, yet
Sound.
very compliant. Yes. That's what it's about. And that's what most people want. And some people don't know how to do that. And some horses that are resistant to that are not necessarily wired for that. You have to make them that way. And it takes time, and it takes persistence, and it takes timing. And timing is so important with training a horse. I mean, even when you're just teaching them to rein or teaching them to follow you and lead, it's all about timing. It's pressure, release, and timing, and some, reward there, pressure and release. So, um, if you come to me, and you've got a horse that you got for sale, and I charge you $2,500 to train that horse, and then you sell it for 5,000, half of your money has gone into training.
Right.
At up to 3-4 year old horse, how long have you kept it? How much have you got into it for feed, vaccine, worming, all of that care? Have you made any money? And unfortunately, there's a lot of people that try it, and they get over their head. They think, yeah, I can do all of this myself. I can watch some videos or read some books, and I can train a horse, and I can make some money at this. Yeah, that horse has got to be either extraordinary, or you got to be a quick study, to make that so that that horse is really sellable, and you can do this repeatably, long-term, sustainable type of a training regime, or your horses are consistent to turn out like that. It just doesn't normally happen overnight. You got to be able to maintain that, and your horse stay trained. Where in a market that's, if you're selling them for 20,000, and you're you know doing about what, 12% into your training, that's not bad. I mean, you could do that. But if you're selling them and you're not making any money on it, that's when a lot of people hang their shingle out. And then a lot of people are say, yeah, I used to raise horses. I mean, it happens. I have people I haven't seen in 15, 20 years, and they'll go, oh, you still training horses, you still raising horses? Oh yeah, we're still doing it. And they're like, oh, or one question was, somebody asked one day, and there was a bunch of people around on my former life at that outside job, and they said, how many horses you got? I'm like, yeah, too many to too many to feed, and not enough at sale time. Same as say with the calves, I don't want to commit to that. And they go, well, you just don't want to say, because, and then, trying to goad me into it. And I said, well, you know what? I'll be honest with you. It's north of 50 head at that time. It was, I'm not exactly sure the exact count. They're like, everybody's turning their heads and they're going, you have 50 head of horses? You can't afford that. And I said, you don't have that many horses and not make money with them,
Yeah.
because they'll make you go broke fast if you don't.
Yeah. Especially
So,
horses, because of all the
especially
extra
horses.
maintenance that you're talking
Absolutely.
about.
Yep. And I said, if they don't make you money, then you can't have that many, because that goes just as sharp and just as hard into the debt as it does into profit if you're doing well. And so they're, it kind of changed the conversation a little bit, and then all kinds of questions started. But the cattle, you're not putting that into them, but you got to know how to work cattle as well. I mean, if you waha and ram and jam your cattle, you're not going to have a herd that's that manageable. And that's when your risk comes in corrals, and they're tearing stuff up. They're going through fences. They're not keeping weight on. You want them also happy, content, and kind of thrilled to stay home. So they'll get fat. They'll breed up. They'll raise a calf, and you can skim that crop off of them and go at a price that you can't control.
So would you
It's
say between the two of them, it's probably the same answer, which is know what your cost benefit is and just run with that?
It is, and it's a matter really of the cows. The cows are a lot of labor, especially in wintertime and calving. When you're
Yeah.
feeding and calving, because it's a large volume. You're feeding a lot more than you would be. Most people have, maybe half a dozen horses or a couple of horses, and so that's a minimal, care. You're still doing it, but the expense into that, and then the actual physical action of doing something, is a lot less with the horses that way than it is with the cows, because of the volume. However, you've still got a lot of work with those horses. Horses are very labor intensive, and the cows, you can kind of put an eye on them, and you don't have to go and put your hands on them. Where a horse, you should be putting your hands on those horses and keeping them tuned up.
All right. With that, we will put this conversation out to pasture.